Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to the thrilling last block of plenary talks. If we can get everybody back. My name's Eric Juengst. I direct the Bioethics Center at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And the title, which Heather and Nicole came up with for me, of my talk, Genomes, Metallurgy, and Human Progress. Now that's interesting, that's thought-provoking. Maybe it's going to be like making genome sequencing machines out of tinfoil or something. Actually not, so I have to start with a little word of explanation about this title. The internet outed me to Heather and about my hobby. I have a hobby, which is making suits of armor out of found materials. So the suit that I'm wearing in this picture is made out of woks, stir-frying woks, which are great mild steel, easily shaped without a forge. For the makers in the audience, this might be interesting, but it's really, wow, does no good for the world, except for me. I'm taking perfectly serviceable woks, which could be used to cook food in third world countries, and turning them into a celebration of old-fashioned forms of human violence. So it's kind of a transgressive, a weird hobby for an ethicist, but I do think about ethics in my day job, so I allow myself this on the weekends. And there won't really be much about this in my talk as I go forward, so I thought I would at least have one slide to show you the metallurgy features. These are all made out of your ordinary household objects like planters, trash cans, fireplace log holders, and I've recently especially gotten interested in pet armor for our animal friends who face more challenges than we do in the ordinary course of life. So a question mark by metallurgy in the title, also a question mark by human progress, because I'll leave it up to you to decide whether the two stories that I want to tell from genomics count as examples of human progress or not. The first story comes out of the State of the Union address this winter. President Obama announced a new initiative in his waning days. He's going to put a lot of money into a precision medicine initiative. And this marks a success story for the director of NIH, Francis Collins, and other people in the genome science world, because this is exactly the sort of national initiative, a national investment in the translation of genomics into clinical medicine that they've been pushing for since the early days of the Genome Project. So we need to flash back a little bit to understand this initiative. Back 25 years to 1990, at the dawn of the Human Genome Project, when the scientific community decided we had the resources and the techniques to finally systematically map and sequence the human genome, identify all the coding regions, and locate where they live on our various chromosomes. One of the, let's go back, one of the interesting prophetic quotes from the early 90s about the Genome Project was this one. The early literature is interesting, I think, for betraying or exposing the underlying value commitments in a particular branch of science. Patricia Baird, Canadian geneticist, said, "We need to look at our own genetic individuality as a potential origin of disease, We're all different. We're all genetically unique. And we need to tailor medicine to that reality. And that's, in a nutshell, the essence of precision medicine. For those of you who come out of a Protestant religious tradition, real echoes of the doctrine of original sin here, right? Our troubles are inborn. Our troubles are inherited, and that's where we should look for solutions. So the Genome Project got started then. One of the things that's interesting to an ethicist is the fact that it's never been without a kind of an ethical frisson behind it, an ethical question mark with it, which even comes out in the iconography of the project. The image of the cell with the DNA bursting out of it was the NIH's own favorite image, their graphic for the Genome Project. Always reminded me of the Alien movies, right? With the monster bursting from the chest of the victim. The other image is from Dartmouth, an early article of theirs promoting the Human Genome Project, again with a kind of ambivalent image, the tree of knowledge and Adam and Eve in white coats, picking from it with the snake, again, curled around it. But the favorite image of the genome community itself was this one, also an old and evocative image. Yesterday, I was glad to hear we had Michael Bizdak, a medievalist, in the audience, because it's a medieval image of the human genome as the Holy Grail of human biology. So here maybe my armory interest can come back in, because the question facing us now is, having achieved the Grail, having mapped the genome and sequenced it in 2003, how do we live with the Holy Grail? Not something that the medieval texts tell us much about. What they did do was to give us some ideas about how to go on a quest for something like the Holy Grail. That's what those stories are good for. And some of the cool features of the Human Genome Project echo those stories. You remember that Percival was one of the first knights to actually encounter the Grail on his search, and he blew it because he forgot to ask the Grail questions. What is the Grail and who does it serve? He didn't ask, it went on its way. Kingdom fell into a wasteland, took many years after that for them to find it again. At the Genome Project, they wanted to ask the right questions from the beginning, and so one of the innovations in that project in the 90s was to build in a program of social science and ethics and law research to try to anticipate the downstream impact of knowing all our genes. The second kind of lesson that comes out of the Grail sagas are that while you're searching for the Grail, once the kingdom's in a wasteland, you need to protect those who are put at risk by this quest. Lancelot finally barely achieved the Grail at the very end of his life because he had spent the whole time trying to protect the innocent he encountered along the way, and righting wrongs and fighting giants and dragons and that sort of thing. The wrongs and rights and dragons that we anticipated in the Human Genome Project were the sorts of ways in which knowing more about our genes could be used against people. And insurance discrimination and employment discrimination in the US was very much focused on the ways they could be used to exclude people from social opportunities. And so a lot of effort was spent to try to put into place protections like GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which was finally enacted in 2008, which ostensibly does protect those of us who get our insurance from our employers from having our genetic risks used against us. And finally, the genome research community has an interesting ethos of its own, which is designed to allow them to keep their focus on the ball and it's an ethos of sharing, of pooling data and information to speed the process. That's dbGaP in NIH speak, the common repository, the database where genome scientists pool their DNA sequence information. The idea there was to spurn the false grails of commercialization by pooling data before we keep it to ourselves, rush out, patent it, try to commercialize it. So, great. With those kinds of principles in place, we mapped the genome and could enjoy its gifts. What could we get from it? Well, Francis Collins, in many ways the mastermind of this project, suggested we would have three sorts of gifts from this particular genomic grail. New risk tests, like the BRCA1 tests that are in the news thanks to Angelina Jolie. New ways to anticipate our future vulnerabilities and risks. Also, perhaps, new ways to tailor our medicines to our own genetic constitutions, personalized genomic medicine. And maybe, down the road, ways to apply this to public health issues by developing genomic approaches to controlling infectious and environmental health risks. Maybe. Well, on the first score, the risk tests, that was quickly picked up by the private sector in a raft of offerings of direct-to-consumer risk testing. Why bother your doctor with this when you can order these kinds of projective risk tests online? So all the companies that sprung up favoring first-person pronouns in their names, decode me, know me, myself, were offering the ability for us to learn more about our risks without the intervention of medicine, which is why, of course, I think NIH and the medical community shifted gears a little bit and said, the gift we really want to give you is a medically mediated genomics, personalized genomic medicine, not just the Wild West of commercial direct-to-consumer testing. Francis Collins says, we're on the verge of a revolution in medicine. This is going to change the way we practice medicine, tailoring medicines to individuals and getting away from the one-size-fits-all approach. That's what this precision medicine initiative is all about. But it faces a challenge. The problem is we're a pretty young and homogeneous species. We're mostly alike at the genome level. And so to find those interesting variants in the genome that would allow us to tailor drugs to specific constitutions, we really need to look at a lot of people, a lot of genomes. That means, and a lot of clinical data, phenotypic data, to be able to correlate variations with different kinds of clinical traits. That means we're going to need a cohort of research volunteers that's much bigger than we usually cobble together in genetic family studies. So the goal of the President's initiative is to create this 1 million person cohort of volunteers. And if you look at their website, it sounds like it's pretty cool. The recruitment of a bunch of information altruists who will be really willing to donate their DNA and clinical data to the greater good, not worry about their privacy, not worry about those fears of genetic discrimination, and have some degree of personalized control over what studies are done. That's the way it was announced already 3 months later. the challenge, the bioethical challenge in this initiative is that people are pointing out that actually, recruiting 1 million people prospectively and giving them all kinds of choices about what's done with their information, that's pretty expensive. We've got lots of DNA lying around in lots of repositories, consented kind of ambiguously, but many of them, old pathological specimens, have generic consents for future research attached. Why don't we just cobble those together in a network of biobanks and use that as our cohort? Well, that's the first story. And I'm out of time. But the pause for this is, how globally translatable is this story? Personalized, individualized, tailored medicine is great, it sells well in America, but are the kinds of questions, the health issues, the health problems you're facing in the rest of the world ones that need that, or could they actually benefit just as well from a one-size-fits-all medicine, simple and effective? The other story I wanted to tell you about was the international side of this, which is an initiative in Africa, H3 Africa, Health, Heredity, Human Heredity and Health in Africa, which is an attempt to do the precision medicine initiative, like the president wants to do in the US, for the whole continent of Africa. We've tried various attempts at this in the past because we have been interested in gathering as much genetic variation data as we can. And in the past, that's usually meant going to as far-flung a set of places as we could to collect DNA from the four corners of the earth in a kind of parachute science mode. Didn't work very well politically or ethically because people didn't appreciate being parachuted in and having their samples taken back to NIH for study for the benefit of American medicine as they saw it. If you think about it, actually using comparative genomics as a research tool is not just double-edged, it's a quadruple-edged sword, because as much as we will learn about the genomic similarity of people, and as great as that might be about disabusing people of racism and intergroup animosities, we're really interested in the diversity blade because that's where the interesting variations lie, and that's where we will be trying to draw lines between groups of people and differentiating them in genetic grounds. So I'm going to skip Sir Firefitz. So the kinds of worries that have come up about this form of research are the ones that are probably familiar to you in other contexts where indigenous resources are in danger of being exploited by the first world for first world goals. Biopiracy, the problem of trying to reify particular population groups as different in themselves. How are we going to do benefit sharing when the benefits are way down the road from a basic research genomic study? What control do the local communities get to have in this? Nicely illustrated, and I'll wrap up with this, I think, because it's such a great little poem, attributed variously in the literature to African, Australian, or South American communities, which makes me think actually might have been written by one of you, one of the advocates and activists for indigenous peoples, but it's still applicable. First, they came for our bodies because they thought we had no souls, slavery. Then they came for our souls because they thought we were ignorant, missionaries. Then they came for our knowledge because we thought we had secrets, pharma, looking for medicinal plants and indigenous knowledge. Now they think our secrets are in our blood, so they come back for our bodies again. Genomic research. what's come out of this, and the ethical question that is on the table at the moment for H3 Africa, is that even though the tide has turned, this is not parachute science. The goal of this initiative is to give the money from the Wellcome Trust, from NIH, from other first world funders to African scientists, to African institutions to build their own genomic research enterprise. That's cool, capacity building. But the challenge that's come up is that the continent is not a single homogeneous society. Wow, imagine that. It has plenty of internecine political worries of its own. And so some countries have begun to balk at the idea, not of shipping their samples to NIH or to London, but shipping their samples to Cape Town or to Lagos, because they see the big boys of the continent as just as potentially exploitative and oppressive as the former colonialists. So what this is producing, if I can buzz ahead a little bit, is the notion of genomic sovereignty, a political concept which used to be applied to genetic resources in plants and animals, now being applied to human populations. Mexico introduced this idea when it did its genome diversity project to protect itself against exploitation by its northern neighbor. Said Mexican-derived human genome data are the property of Mexico's government, and we prohibit its collection, use, and export without government approval. Mexican-derived. What they were really complaining about here was the NIH's recruitment of Mexican Americans in Los Angeles as research subjects in a genomic study. So they're not just talking about the genomes in their borders, they're talking about some kind of extended national ethnic sense of Mexican genomes. Let's skip this and skip that, and stop at the second pause, which is to just say, right, given that people are attached to their genomes in special ways and have special feelings about their genetic information, what is the best way to respect local interests in these resources when the genomic enterprise is built on the need to share and pool and exploit that data for the common good? Should we treat local genomes like local mineral resources, like diamonds? This is a reference to a slide I skipped, an interesting article, Mining the African Genome, where they make this analogy. To be exploited by countries themselves and sold for local benefit to NIH in London for the global good? Or should we try to think of other ways of conceptualizing our genetic resources? How about, for example, comparing our genes to our stories? They are the stories of our families in many ways. Or our songs, our folk songs. How do we celebrate and respect indigenous folk songs from around the world? Well, by sharing them, by promoting them, by celebrating them at the world stage. And maybe that's a different way of thinking about the way to think about genetics. Now we'll talk about the politics of the music business. But that's what I'll leave you with, an interesting organization that's involved in trying to address these issues is the LC 2.0 for Genomics and Society, an international network of people from many stripes, all concerned about the rise of notions of genetic sovereignty, of the genetic essentialism and quasi-racism that comes along with it, and the questions of commercialization of genomics. So we finally finished the Human Genome Project. Now that we've finished the genome map, now we just can't figure out how to fold it. And if you've ever been working with a badly folded map while you're speeding down the interstate, you know how dangerous that can be. So as the guardian of the Grail said to Indiana Jones, choose wisely. Thank you.